After my mother passed away last winter, I inherited Blackthorn House, a large, old Victorian mansion sitting at the edge of Willow Creek, a quiet town where fog lingers most of the year. The house had belonged to my family for 3 generations, but I had never lived there full-time. I grew up in the city, busy with college and work, always too occupied to visit the lonely old house that my mother loved so deeply. To me, it was nothing more than a distant memory: creaky wooden floors, dim hallways, dusty windows, and silence so heavy it felt alive. When the lawyer told me I was the sole heir, I decided to move in temporarily. I needed time away from my fast-paced life, time to grieve, and time to clear out my mother's belongings before selling the place. I expected peace, solitude, and closure. I never expected to find a stranger living inside my empty house. The first week was completely quiet. I spent my days sorting through old boxes, folding my mother's clothes, reading her worn books, and walking through every room to familiarize myself with the house I'd ignored for so long. Blackthorn House was far larger than I remembered. It had high ceilings, a long winding corridor upstairs, a forgotten attic, and a backyard overgrown with wild ivy and dead rose bushes. At night, the house settled into a deep, hollow silence. The floorboards creaked with every small shift of wind, the old pipes whispered, and the trees outside tapped against the glass like soft fingers. I told myself it was just an old house being old. I refused to be superstitious. On the 8th night, I noticed something strange. I had locked every door and window before bed, just as I always did. I double-checked the front door, the back door, and the basement entrance. I even pulled the curtains closed in every room. But when I woke up at 2 in the morning, the downstairs living room light was on. I froze in bed, my heart thudding loudly in my ears. I knew I had turned all the lights off. I was certain of it. Cautiously, I grabbed a lamp from my nightstand and walked slowly down the stairs. The house felt different at night, colder, heavier, as if someone was holding their breath in the shadows. When I reached the living room, the overhead chandelier glowed softly, illuminating the empty couches, the wooden bookshelves, and the quiet fireplace. No one was there. No windows were open. No doors were unlocked. It was completely empty. I told myself I must have forgotten to turn it off. Exhaustion, grief, stress, all of it was messing with my mind. I turned the light off, double-checked everything again, and returned to bed. Still, I could not shake the strange feeling that I was not alone in the house. The next night, it happened again this time. The kitchen light was on. I distinctly remembered closing the kitchen cabinets, turning off the stove light, and locking the kitchen window. Yet at midnight, warm yellow light spilled out into the hallway. I walked down slowly, every muscle tense, half expecting to find an intruder. But once more, the room was empty. The air was still. The floors were undisturbed. There was no sign of anyone breaking in. That was when fear truly began to settle in my bones. On the 3rd night, I decided to stay awake. I sat on the upstairs landing, hidden in shadow, watching the hallway and the staircase, determined to catch whatever was turning the lights on. At 1:30 in the morning, I heard it. Soft, quiet footsteps coming from the first floor. They were slow, gentle footsteps, not heavy or threatening, just calm and steady, pacing back and forth across the wooden living room floor. My breath caught in my throat. I leaned forward, peering down the long staircase, and my blood ran cold. A woman was walking in my living room. She wore a simple, old-fashioned white dress, the kind people wore decades ago. Her hair was dark and long, falling over her shoulders. She moved slowly, almost dreamily, as if she knew every corner of the house better than I ever could. She did not look up. She did not seem to know I was watching her. She simply walked, paused by the bookshelf, touched the wooden frame gently, and then continued pacing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I was paralyzed by shock. I lived alone here. The house was locked from the inside. There was no way for anyone to enter. Yet this woman was clearly real, clearly present, moving calmly through my home in the dead of night. Before I could gather the courage to confront her, she vanished. 1 second she was standing by the fireplace. The next second the room was empty. The lights flickered once and turned off completely. The house sank back into total darkness and silence, as if she had never existed at all. The next morning, I searched the entire house from top to bottom. I checked every closet, every cabinet, the attic, the basement, every hidden corner. I found nothing. No footprints, no traces of anyone staying over, no broken locks, no open windows. The house was as untouched and still as it had always been. I began researching the history of Blackthorn House. I visited the local town library, read old newspaper archives, and asked the elderly librarian if any strange events had ever been recorded here. At first, she hesitated, her expression careful and quiet. But after I explained what I had experienced over the past week, she finally sighed and told me the story no one in town liked to talk about 50 years ago. A young woman named Clara lived in Blackthorn House. She was the daughter of my great-aunt. She was young, kind, quiet, and deeply in love with a local boy who promised to marry her. They planned a future together inside this very house. But one winter night, the boy left town suddenly, without a single word, without any explanation. He abandoned her completely. Heartbroken and alone, Clara spent months waiting for him to return. She wandered the house every night, pacing the halls, hoping he would walk through the door. He never came back. One cold December night, Clara locked herself inside Blackthorn House and never came out alive. Local rumors said she died of grief, trapped in her own broken heart and empty home. People claimed her spirit never left. She still wanders the halls at night, waiting for someone who will never arrive. When I heard the story, my skin turned cold. I had seen her. I had watched Clara pacing my living room, trapped in the same endless waiting that had defined her final days. For a moment, I felt overwhelming sadness for her. She was not a threat. She was just a lonely ghost stuck in an eternal loop of sorrow. For the next few days, I tried to accept it. I told myself I was witnessing a tragedy from the past, a lost soul bound to the house. I even started leaving a small lamp on downstairs at night, hoping it would bring her a little comfort. I stopped feeling scared. I started feeling sympathetic. Then the real twist arrived. One afternoon, while cleaning out my mother's old study, I found a hidden locked drawer in her wooden desk. Inside was a yellow journal, its pages brittle with age, written in handwriting I did not recognize. It belonged to Clara. After reading the first few pages, I realized everything the town believed about Clara was wrong. The entire story was a lie. Clara had not died from heartbreak. She had not been waiting for a lover who abandoned her. The truth was far darker. As I read page after page of her journal, the real story unfolded. 50 years ago, Clara had not been abandoned. She had discovered a terrible secret. My own family had been hiding a financial crime, a fraud that would have ruined generations of our name. When Clara threatened to expose the truth, my relatives locked her inside Blackthorn House to silence her. They spread false rumors around town, painting her as a heartbroken, unstable girl who'd been abandoned by love. They told everyone she died of sorrow. In reality, she was trapped, isolated, and intentionally forgotten. She died alone in this house because my family chose silence over justice. My stomach turned as I read the final entry in her journal, written on the day she died. They will tell lies about me forever. But one day, someone in their blood will finally know the truth. One day, someone will set me free. And that moment, everything changed. The ghostly appearances were not random. She was not wandering in grief. She was trying to communicate. She was waiting for a member of my family to finally uncover the truth, to break the cycle of lies that had trapped her soul for half a century. That night, I waited for her to appear again. I sat quietly in the living room, the lights dim, my hands trembling slightly as I held her old journal in my lap. At midnight, the soft footsteps returned. She walked into the room slowly, her white dress pale in the shadowed light, her movements calm and unhurried. This time, she looked directly at me. Her eyes were not sad or angry. They were hopeful. I spoke softly, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I know what happened to you. I know the truth now. My family lied about you. I'm so sorry. For a long moment, she simply stood there, watching me. Then, slowly, she nodded. A faint, gentle smile touched her lips. The endless sorrow that had lingered in the room for 50 years seemed to lift, as if a heavy chain had finally broken free. I continued speaking. I will tell everyone the real story. I will clear your name. You don't have to wait anymore. As soon as the words left my mouth, the atmosphere of the house shifted. The coldness faded. The heavy silence lifted. The shadow around her figure slowly dissolved, like mist melting in sunlight. She took one last step forward, looked at me gratefully, and then she was gone. Not vanishing in fear or sorrow, but fading peacefully, finally free. After that night, the lights never turned on by themselves again. The footsteps never returned. The house stopped feeling haunted. It simply felt quiet, calm, and finally at peace. But the story had one final twist that I never saw coming. A week later, I found an old family photograph tucked inside the back cover of Clara's journal. It was a picture of Clara as a young girl, standing in front of Blackthorn House, smiling brightly. When I saw her face, my breath stopped completely. She looked exactly like me. Not similar. Not a resemblance. She had my face, my eyes, my smile, the exact same facial structure. In that instant, I understood everything. Clara was not just a distant relative. According to the notes written behind the photo, Clara was my grandmother's twin sister. The family had erased her from every record, every tree, every memory. They buried her story completely to protect their reputation. I was not just a stranger uncovering her truth. I was her blood. I was the family member she had waited 50 years for. I was the one destined to break the lies that had destroyed her life. Standing alone in the quiet living room, I finally realized the true meaning of everything I had experienced. The haunting was never a curse. It was a promise that truth would always find its way out, no matter how long it was hidden, no matter how many generations tried to bury it. Blackthorn House was no longer a place of grief, secrets, or ghosts.